The Korean War, which took place from June 25, 1950, to July 27, 1953, was one of the first major conflicts of the Cold War and a defining moment in modern history. Its roots can be traced to the division of Korea at the end of World War II. After the defeat of Japan in 1945, Korea was liberated but split along the 38th parallel, with the Soviet Union occupying the north and the United States occupying the south. This division quickly became permanent as the Cold War deepened, and two rival governments emerged, a communist regime in the north led by Kim Il-sung, supported by the Soviet Union and later by China, and a capitalist government in the south under Syngman Rhee, heavily backed by the United States. Both leaders sought to unify the peninsula under their respective ideologies, and tensions escalated steadily in the years leading up to the war. The conflict began on June 25, 1950, when North Korea launched a surprise invasion of South Korea. Using Soviet-supplied tanks and artillery, the North Korean People's Army swiftly advanced southward, capturing Seoul within days. This aggressive move shocked the international community and prompted the United Nations to act. Under the leadership of the United States, the UN condemned the invasion and formed a coalition to assist South Korea. President Harry Truman framed the intervention as a critical step in containing communism, marking a significant escalation in Cold War geopolitics. During the early months of the war, North Korean forces overwhelmed South Korean and UN troops, forcing them into a desperate defensive position around the Pusan perimeter in the southeast corner of the peninsula. However, the tide turned dramatically in September 1950, when General Douglas MacArthur orchestrated a daring amphibious landing at Incheon, a port city near Seoul. This bold maneuver cut off North Korean supply lines and allowed UN forces to recapture Seoul and push the North Koreans back across the 38th parallel. Emboldened by this success, UN troops advanced deep into North Korea, nearing the Yalu River, which marked the border with China. This advance, however, provoked a massive response from China. Fearing a hostile Western presence on its border, China entered the war in October 1950, sending hundreds of thousands of soldiers from the People's Volunteer Army into Korea. Their intervention was decisive, forcing UN forces into a rapid retreat. By early 1951, the Chinese and North Korean forces had recaptured Seoul. However, the UN regrouped, and by the spring of 1951, they managed to stabilize the front near the original dividing line at the 38th parallel. What followed was 2 years of brutal stalemate, characterized by trench warfare, relentless artillery barrages, and battles over small but strategically important hills such as Heartbreak Ridge and Pork Chop Hill. Throughout this period, peace negotiations were underway, but they were slow and fraught with disagreements, particularly over the repatriation of prisoners of war. Meanwhile, the human cost of the war continued to climb. Millions of Korean civilians were killed or displaced, entire cities were reduced to rubble, and soldiers on both sides endured unimaginable hardships. The air war was particularly devastating, with U.S. bombers conducting massive raids that obliterated much of North Korea's infrastructure. Finally, after prolonged negotiations, an armistice was signed on July 27, 1953, at Panmunjom. This agreement established a Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, along the 38th parallel, effectively restoring the pre-war boundary. However, no formal peace treaty was ever signed, leaving the Korean peninsula in a state of unresolved conflict that persists to this day. The war had far-reaching consequences. It solidified the division of Korea, with the North becoming an isolated, militarized dictatorship and the South eventually transforming into a vibrant democracy and economic powerhouse. It also reinforced the global polarization of the Cold War, showing the lengths to which the United States and its allies would go to contain communism. The Korean War is often referred to as the Forgotten War, due to its overshadowing by World War II and the Vietnam War, yet its legacy is profound. It reshaped geopolitics in East Asia, entrenched the division of the Korean Peninsula, and set a precedent for US-led military interventions during the Cold War. Its impact is still felt today, as the unresolved tensions between North and South Korea remain a flashpoint in global diplomacy.